invited on an old friend of mine from National Power Sport Auctions, NPA. You know them, they're nationwide. Tony Altieri. Tony's the VP of Business Development at NPA. And thankfully, he and I haven't talked too much over the years, and we got to catch up a little bit today. Tony, I appreciate you jumping on with me.
No worries, man. I appreciate the invite. I've, kind of followed it from afar and seen you kind of build this thing out. So I feel very honored to be here.
It was the first time I'd ever been to a real live auction. Was my first auction going to NPA. So I showed up there, set the sale up with Mike. It was a Friday, jump up, do the deal. And I remember talking, I don't remember if it was Cliff after the fact. And he's like, how did it go? And I was like, man, what an amazing first auction. And his eyes opened up like, we hired you as a guy who'd never been to an auction. And you show up at 1,000 unit auction. Just insane,
Yeah, no, it's funny because it's an industry that everybody kind of knows exists, but unless you work in it, it's really tough to deliver any kind of context on what the auction's like. It really is its own life force. And for us, on the power sports side, it's this really, really beautiful marriage of the auction process and then the passion that's involved in the industry. Most of the people that work at NPA are riders, are passionate about it. And so it's really cool to be able to blend what you love with what you do for work. And, I'm happy to say I've been lucky enough to be with NPA for over 10 years now. And I can honestly say that in those 10 years, there's been a handful of times in my life where I've dreaded coming to work. And that's specifically been around something that I've screwed up and I'm going to have to talk to somebody about it. It had nothing to do with what I was doing. It's a great industry, and having the ability to do the auction business around another passion like power sports it's great, man. And I think like you, when I walked into it, I've been in the auction business now for 15 years, a little over 15 years, so 5 years prior to this. And I had the same kind of experience. It's just you're blown away at the magnitude, the volume, the pace, everything that's in there, and the life force that's really involved in the auction. And it's a very, very cool experience if you've never had it before.
What's kind of the State of the Union or most recent one? Like, what sort of trends you see in there?
Yeah, for lack of sounding like a brokered record for anybody that's seen the videos the last few weeks, it's been pretty unbelievable. We've had 2 sales this week. So far, we have one more on Friday, but we had a sale in Philadelphia and then one in Madison, Wisconsin. And both of them were just, again, for lack of a better term, they were just off the charts. The sell-through to me is the thing that is most telling. I've mentioned it, I think, a couple times in the videos, and you probably remember from your auction days, but it's like a really good auction in springtime because spring's kind of the peak. Like if you can sell 80-85% of the stuff that's in the building, like that's a home run, right? In the fall when things are tough, like you're battling to sell 70% of the inventory that's in the building. These last few weeks, today and yesterday, as an example of the last few weeks, we sold all but 3 vehicles today in the building. So, yeah, a lot of that has to do with volume. Not only our volume, our volume is definitely off. I've mentioned that multiple times in the videos, and that's the one thing I think that if you've watched all 5, is common in all 5 is right now, all the different businesses and processes that support what we do on the auction side are still pretty much in hibernation. So on the bank side, a lot of lenders are choosing not to repossess from customers. So even if somebody's in default because of everything that's happened, if they've missed payments, most of the lenders are working with debtors today, which is appropriate. I think that's probably a really good step. Some are offering deferments, tacking payments onto the end, offering payment forgiveness, those kinds of things to keep people in loans because a lot of people are out of jobs. But in addition to that, you've got, with no banks basically placing repossessions, you've got nobody picking bikes up and taking them into repo yards and no carriers bringing them in. At the dealership level, you hear a lot about guys having unbelievable, Aprils and Mays off to an amazing start, which is 100% true. But the part of that that's lacking is, typically on most new and used vehicles, at least 1 out of 3, 1 out of 4, you're going to have a trade-in. And that's obviously not happening now because most of the business that's being done is being done via telephone or over the internet. So you don't have the influx of people walking in with trade-ins. So with both of those two major avenues of inventory for us on the auction side, basically slowed down to a trickle. We're running probably at 50, 60% of what we would typically see in terms of volume. So not only is demand way up at the dealership level, but you've got this compounding factor of supply just being so cut down on where it normally is, that it's created a doubling down where we have these unbelievable conversion rates where we're selling basically everything in the sale, and guys are paying anything that they possibly can to buy the vehicle because there just really are no avenues for inventory. And the other part of that is that supply chain that not only supports us, it also supports the OEMs. It supports all the other avenues where dealers can source inventory from. So if there's limited carriers hauling product for us or for the banks or for the OEMs, there's probably limited carriers on the road. If I'm a really good dealer who's great at sourcing inventory, it's difficult for me to buy even from the street or from other dealerships because it's tough to get stuff picked up and moved. DMVs are shut down. OEMs are slowly starting to turn back on production. I know one OEM that flat out told me they hadn't shipped a bike since January. So, all of those things I think are contributing factors on why we've seen the marketplace at the auction so strong. And until those things start to get turned back on, which, we're hearing they are, and we're starting to see that come to fruition. But until they get back to, 70, 80, 90% of the capacity that they were at prior to coronavirus, I think you're going to have this extended period of extremely high demand and strong pricing.
That'd be an interesting position for them to be in all of a sudden, and then maybe as things start to get to some state of normalcy, does that sort of kink in the hose come loose, and then there's a lot more used available potentially. I'm obviously the trader, so I do the sort of the marketplace and the retail consumer side of it. And I think, man, just, I hope that more and more people take the opportunity to say, I'm going to finally get that, toy, whatever it is, and call it transportation, even though we know it is. I'm always hopeful that we can grow that space, that side out.
Yeah, and I think that's what we've seen, at least with, we talked to a lot of dealers, we run surveys, we talk to lenders. So there's a bunch of information funnels that are bringing us information. And the one common thread I think that I hear from everyone in the industry today is that, that a lot of people who are affected by these restrictions, at whatever level, there's a yearning to get out and go do stuff in, our industry, and probably the broader, what I would call like outdoor industry, which would encompass things like camping and RVing and boating. All those outdoor activities, I think, are seeing a massive resurgence because folks are like, okay, what can I do where I can take my family, I can be responsible and practice social distancing, but we can all go and have a great time. I've got extra money, right? You've got a bunch of people who receive stimulus money. So, if you're a guy who's got a wife and 2 kids, I mean, you're upwards of, $3,000, $4,000 in your pocket. And if you haven't been too adversely affected, what I mean by that is you've got a job and you're at home with your kids, got extra money. Maybe I go down and buy something that we can all do. Maybe I buy a Razor or a Maverick. Maybe I go get a bike and my wife and I hop on the back. Maybe we'll get a camper and I take the family out. So I think that, all those factors that I mentioned about that are affecting the supply side, I think you've also got something happening on the consumer level where you have people that have idle time on their hands. They're yearning to get out of their houses, and they've got stimulus money in their pockets. And the industry that we're in offers a great outlet to kind of check all those boxes. So I think those two big things, what's happening in our industry, and then the psychology and the economics behind what's happening with the consumers, I think is why we've seen just this boom in sales here over the last 45 days, and why I think it's likely to not shift too much. And the only reason why I say likely instead of why it's not going to is the big thing that I don't know is, how much how much unemployment's going to affect things, whether it's going to get way worse or it's going to slow down. And as things open up, people are going to go back to work. Those things are tough to be able to figure out. I mean, you got people in the federal government and, people that work in the Federal Reserve and things like that are trying to diagnose and prognosticate on what's going to happen. And they don't even know, because I think we are in an unprecedented time. But, for us in our industry, I think it's a great opportunity, to your point, to introduce people who might have been on the outskirts or on the fence about participating. And the more that we can do from an outreach perspective, and when I say we, everybody, we've got a responsibility as NPA, and I think we're doing the best that we can. But just as kind of evangelists, people that ride and people that are in the industry, to continue to talk to people and showcase what it really offers, because I think in some sense it is an antidote to a lot of the ailments that we're suffering from like a society's perspective today. It's not going to cure coronavirus, but it could cure the cabin fever that you've been experiencing over the 30 days. And I think it's offered at a price point that's really, really digestible and promotes people being with their families and being together and doing those things. And so I realize I'm like a preacher speaking to the choir, but I just think there's a lot of great things that our industry can do. And even though it's a terrible time for us as a country from a health perspective and an economic perspective, there's always opportunity born out of that. And there's abilities to do great things and good things. And I think we can do that while supporting our businesses and our industries because of what we do.
Some of these, is it people who've been out of it, people who are just eager to shop and get that sort of release on, okay, I'm going to get a new toy. I got time to think about it. I'm actually making the decision when all this wraps up or as soon as possible. But then I saw, I don't know if it was yesterday or early this morning, I was on and saw an article from the automotive space, and it talked about some big increases in people at the younger age demographics who typically, I think, were going to not do their own transport. They were going to ride public transportation, that sort of thing. And it talked about a survey or a study that was done here recently where a lot more of them said they're going to be looking at their own transportation. I started thinking, well, there you go. Motorcycles, that's the transportation you need as a young person or whatever. So I took away some additional hope based on, those all showing me that level of information.
Yeah, no, I think there's, this thing, what it does, whenever you have these big events that happen, I don't care if it's the recession, 9/11, but anything that kind of, it's like slamming a car into a wall where everything just stops and everyone's forced to take evaluation of everything that's going on. And, a lot of those trends that seem like certainties, like that you mentioned, things like Uber and Lyft, where, why would I ever own a car when I can just hop in somebody else's? No one could have ever projected or foreseen what happened with coronavirus and how that would impact people's thinking, but it has. And, for us, thankfully, to your points, for riding a motorcycle or, hopping in side by side or buying a camper or an RV, those things now become much more attractive to folks. There's value in that because of all of the other things that are restricted and controlled now. And there's this thing here in the United States that, that us is, regardless of where your background is or where you live, it's inherent with being American. It's this yearn for personal sovereignty, for freedom. And that's one of the things that makes it difficult to control things like coronavirus in our country, but also is why we tend to bounce back so well whenever there's a major crisis. Is people want to be in control of their freedom. They want to do what they think is best. And that's just kind of who we are in our DNA as Americans. It's one of the weird things. I heard a guy say it before, and I remember it, and I think it's such a cool way to think of our country. Is for most other countries, when you're a person, like take Italy, for example, and I'm half Italian, but you're in Italy and you're from Italy and you're Italian, there's a cultural thing that's tied to the land, right? Like Italians are from Italy. It's all locked together. But when you think about Americans, we're so diverse and so different. America really isn't a territory. It isn't a location. It's an idea. It's a concept. And that's what makes it so amazing. The fact that you could have people from all over the world that would want to be here, and people that live here that love this place and love it for very different reasons, which is why we have so much discord. But I think that's what makes America unique. But the one thing that's beautiful about all of us is this yearn to be free, to be in control of my own life. And that manifests in a number of different ways. But that call that's been reignited in a lot of people because of all of the restrictions related to coronavirus is a great call to action for our industry. And a lot of those things that we yearn for as Americans and for freedom. And I'm not trying to get up on a soapbox and have, bald eagles flying around with the flag waving behind me. But I think it would be remiss if I didn't say that's part of who we are, and what we sell is tied directly to that. And so when people start searching to find that again, like they are today, I think it can be found on a bike and side by side and in the great outdoors.
I completely agree, and I think there's some guys in the industry that I've spoken with here in recent, like at least the most recent month, who have said we're going to see some massive increases in what's going on in this business, and who knows later on, is it like a big bubble and then it goes to sort of flat if we get back to a state of normalcy, in our minds anyway, or is it do we have a whole bunch of people now making the decision to experience the sort of freedom that we've always said, this thing that we do, and to do with power sports, and again, anything outdoor, whether it's like I say with RV and power sports and all the pieces of that, it's definitely, I don't think a reasonable person could say that isn't the case.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that opportunity that both you and I have kind of been circling on with this whole thing. And again, it's difficult to look at opportunity when things are difficult, but there's always opportunity that's presented. And what this has done for us is it's shined a light on our industry. And you have a lot of people that maybe have never looked this direction before, that all of a sudden, because the light's being shined on us, they're like, that seems really interesting. I'd like to find out more about that, or that makes a lot of sense. Or even as far as the values and things that are presented in that are something I need right now. And so they're voting with their dollars to do so. So I think it's up to us to figure out, to your point, is this a small blip? Is it something that we experience as just, a reciprocal of the fall that we had in March, and it'll go away very quickly? I think that really depends a lot on what we do with it as an industry. If we continue to take the spotlight while we have it and say, hey, there's a bunch of great things you can do, and we have lenders that are willing to support you and dealers that are there, and it's fun and easy and it's safe, and all of these things maybe that are related to concerns that consumers have, I think it could be more long lasting. But the spotlight could be turned off at any second, so we've got to maximize our time on stage.
Well, those didn't exist X number of years ago, so interesting that they're there. Did we bring new people in with that? These different pieces. I think that's, just really encouraging. So
yeah, no, I think it's a great point. I wish you could see me. I was nodding here and smiling as you were talking, because I was agreeing with everything that you were saying. I mean, it not only the geographical differences, like in product segments, but like the people within those. You mentioned it, like, you could have people that are fanatics about Gold Wings, and they come from all walks of life and all cultures and ages. Same thing with Harley-Davidsons or Groms or whatever. And so it really is the industry, regardless of how segmented it is on a product standpoint, it brings in people from all walks of life. And I think the experience and the story of doing that is very communal. And I think, regardless of the fact that, you're more often than not, if you're riding a bike, you're doing it by yourself, but you're typically doing it with 4 or 5 other people. And you share that experience with a much broader community of folks that have the same kind of passion for what you do. And that's, to me, what I think is scratching people where they itch today. And I think that's why a lot of people are choosing to vote that way with their dollars, because there's not a lot of other things in life that really do all those things. And power sports has got such an amazing opportunity to experience a more long-term resurgence if we can capitalize on what's happening right now.
There's no one thing. Like, I might say, well, right now I have this, or I have this and this in the garage, and here's where I choose to ride and when, and I've got, the ability to hedge my bet on and going and having fun. But a lot of times it's like, well, I've got this and this in the garage now, and I'm kind of looking at that other thing, or maybe this other thing. So, maybe the whole concept that it can be the drug of choice, and they can definitely continue to say, I need another one, or I want a different one. That sort of keeping them engaged in that. That's definitely encouraging to me.
Yeah, no, I think there's some stat, and I'll probably misquote it in some form or fashion, and then Jim will correct me on where I made my mistake. But I want to say it's like 1 in 3 power sports owners owns multiple products. And it speaks exactly to your point. Like, you kind of get a rush from doing one thing, but the experience, even though it's in the same genre of overall vehicles or activities, it's totally different. The experience of riding a sport bike is different than riding a cruiser. The experience of riding on an ATV in the woods is different than, being in the desert in a side-by-side. And it's not uncommon for folks to have multiple different product segments that they choose from. I always think about that when I ride down the road, or I'm in my car and I see some guy on the back of a Harley and he's got the yellow Honda safety jacket on. I'm like, oh, he probably owns a couple bikes.
What are you guys seeing, I guess, with the geographical component of it? I mean, do you see any sort of trends in different parts of the country where things are, wows over here and not even happening in a different spot? Is any of that? You probably get to see a lot of that.
Yeah, I would say right now, everything is hot fire, for lack of a better term. But if I was to say if there was one segment where we probably see more interest, more demand, and folks bidding probably more frequently, is in the off-road segments. And it goes back to all the points we've talked about, right? On-road's doing great, and don't get me wrong, there's definitely nothing wrong with anything that's happening in any of the on-road vehicle segments. But side-by-sides, ATVs, dirt bikes right now, especially dirt bikes and side-by-sides, they're absolute gold. And if we had 1,000 side-by-sides and 1,000 dirt bikes, we would sell 1,000. They're just on fire right now, and I think a lot of that just speaks to all the things we've already covered in terms of the psychology of the consumer, and then also what's happening from a supply standpoint.
Thanks again for listening to this lost tape of the Dealership Fix It podcast. These guest interviews still hit hard, and we're bringing them back re-edited, sharpened up, and focused entirely on what matters, helping dealerships like yours improve, grow, and win. If you got something out of this one, hit that share button or forward it to a dealership friend who needs it. And make sure you're following the show so we can keep bringing you more content like this with convos with people shaping the power sports industry. Catch you on the next one.
Still guessing what to pay on a used bike? Still holding aged units that just won't move? It's time for a real system. Moto Hunt's ultimate used inventory playbook shows how the best dealers are finding better inventory, pricing trades right, and turning used bikes faster with fewer mistakes and more margin. It's short, real, and free to download right now. Visit dealers.motohunt.com to grab your copy or check for the link in the notes.